On April 1, 2026, 4 human beings did something no person had done in over 50 years. They left Earth behind, not just in spirit, not just in ambition. They physically traveled farther from our planet than any human being in recorded history. 756 miles from Earth. Alone. Silent. In the dark. And what they saw on the far side of the moon left them completely speechless. This is the full story of Artemis II, and most people have no idea what actually happened up there. April 1, 2026, Kennedy Space Center, Florida, 6:35 in the evening. The Space Launch System rocket, the most powerful rocket ever built by NASA, ignited its engines and lifted off from Launch Pad 39B, but this time was different from any launch before it. This time, there were people on board. Commander Reed Wiseman, a veteran NASA astronaut and former International Space Station commander, pilot Victor Glover, the first black astronaut ever assigned to a lunar mission, mission specialist Christina Koch, the record holder for the longest single spaceflight by a woman in history. 328 days in space. And mission specialist Jeremy Hansen, the first Canadian ever to travel to the moon. 4 astronauts. 1 spacecraft named Integrity, and a mission that would rewrite the history books. Their objective sounded simple on paper: fly around the moon and come back. But what happened during those 10 days in deep space was anything but simple. For the first time since Apollo 17 in December 1972, over half a century ago, human beings were leaving the safety of low Earth orbit. They were going back to the moon, and nobody fully knew what they would find. The first day was spent in high Earth orbit, circling our planet while the crew tested every system on board Integrity. Life support, navigation, propulsion, communications, everything had to work perfectly. Because where they were going, there was no rescue, no help, no way back except their own skill and their spacecraft. On April 2nd, Orion fired its engines in what is called a translunar injection burn. At 7:49 in the evening, traveling at 24,527 miles per hour, Integrity broke free from Earth's gravity. The crew was headed to the moon. Commander Wiseman captured a photograph of Earth from the window of Orion on April 2nd. NASA called it simply, "Hello World," a glowing blue sphere, getting smaller by the hour. For the next 3 days, the crew traveled through deep space, a region of the universe where communication signals take seconds to travel, where the temperature outside the spacecraft swings between extreme heat and extreme cold, and where the nearest human being is literally hundreds of thousands of miles away. Astronaut Christina Koch described sleeping in zero gravity, strapped into sleeping bags hanging from the walls like bats suspended from a cave ceiling. Commander Wiseman joked about Koch sleeping upside down from the docking tunnel, but beneath the humor, every single person on that spacecraft knew what was coming. On April 6th, they would reach the moon, and they would fly around its far side, the side that no human eye had ever properly seen. Here is something most people do not realize. The moon always shows us the same face. Every single night you look up at the sky, you are seeing the exact same side of the moon, the near side, the familiar side, the far side, permanently facing away from Earth. Had never been seen by human eyes up close. Not properly, not illuminated, not in full detail. The Apollo astronauts never saw it. Their missions were designed to land on the near side. Their flight paths never allowed a proper view of the far side in daylight. Until April 6, 2026. As Orion approached the lunar surface, coming within just 4,067 miles, the crew received a final list of 30 specific scientific targets to observe. One of them was the Oriental Basin, a crater 600 miles wide, 3.8 billion years old, known to scientists as the Grand Canyon of the Moon. It sits right on the boundary between the near and far side, and no human had ever seen the entire basin with their own eyes before this moment. Commander Wiseman described what he saw. The annular ring, which dappa ikanstans with a bakibir barem, which dappa didir operadsbody describes as a pair of lips or a kiss on the far side of the moon. From here it is very circular in nature. The northern part is wider and darker, the southern part is much lighter. No human being had ever spoken those words before, because no human being had ever seen that view before. Mission specialist Christina Koch looked out her window at the craters covering the surface and described them. What it really looks like is like a lampshade with tiny, pinprick holes and the light shining through. They are so bright compared to the rest of the moon. Pilot Victor Glover stared at the boundary between the lunar night and day, the Terminator, and said, "The Terminator right now is just fantastic. It is the most rugged that I have seen it from a lighting perspective. I wish I had more time to just sit here and describe what I am seeing." And then, Orion disappeared behind the moon completely. This is the part of the mission most people do not know about. When Orion passed behind the moon, all communication with Earth was cut off. No radio signal, no data connection, no contact with mission control in Houston. For 40 minutes, the 4 astronauts were completely and totally alone. Farther from humanity than any human being had ever been in the history of our species, in total silence, on the far side of the moon. What did they do in those 40 minutes? They ate maple cream cookies. Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen had brought them specifically for this moment, to mark the fact that they had traveled somewhere no human had ever been. It was a surreal moment, Commander Wiseman said afterward. And when Orion emerged from behind the moon, and communications were restored, something extraordinary was already happening outside the windows. The sun, the moon, and the Earth had aligned perfectly, a total solar eclipse, but not as seen from Earth, from space, from behind the moon. A perspective that almost no human being in history had ever witnessed. For 54 minutes, the sun disappeared completely behind the Earth, and the moon was lit only by the glow of our planet, sunlight reflecting off Earth's surface back into the darkness of space. Victor Glover stared out the window at a sight that no camera had fully captured and said, "After all of the amazing sights that we saw earlier, we just went sci-fi. You can actually see a majority of the moon. It is the strangest looking thing." But the eclipse was not the only thing they witnessed during those extraordinary hours. Scientists had hoped, but never guaranteed, that the crew might observe something rare during their flyby: impact flashes, space rocks, asteroids, traveling at tens of thousands of miles per hour, visibly smashing into the surface of the moon, live, in real time. Commander Wiseman spotted 2 of them, Jeremy Hansen spotted 2 more, during the communications blackout, while they were completely alone, and out of contact with Earth behind the moon. When communication was restored, and the crew reported what they had seen, mission control in Houston erupted. Scientists were literally jumping up and down, because witnessing asteroid impacts on the moon with the naked human eye, from a spacecraft in deep space, had never happened before in recorded history. The crew named 2 craters they discovered during the flyby. One they called Integrity, after their spacecraft. The other they called Carol, in honor of Commander Wiseman's late wife, Carol Taylor Wiseman. Those names will now be formally submitted to the International Astronomical Union, the organization that governs the naming of celestial bodies across the entire universe. 2 humans who never left Earth, now permanently written into the surface of the moon. On April 7th, Orion fired its engines one final time and began the long journey home. The crew had broken the all-time distance record for human spaceflight, traveling 4,011 miles farther from Earth than any human before them. They had seen parts of the moon no human eye had ever properly seen. They had witnessed asteroid impacts live from space. They had experienced a total solar eclipse from behind the moon. They had been more alone than any human beings in history. And they had done all of it together. 4 people in a spacecraft the size of a large camper van, surviving, working, laughing, and making history. On April 9th, their last full day in space, Mission Control woke the crew with a song called Lonesome Drifter by Charlie Crockett as Orion approached Earth at 337 miles away. On April 10th at 8:07 in the evening, the Orion spacecraft named Integrity splashed down in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of San Diego. Helicopters retrieved the crew and brought them aboard the USS John P. Murtha. Mission accomplished.
When NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman asked Christina Koch to describe the entire mission in just one single word, she did not hesitate for even a second. Humility, she said.
"We would never be here if it were not for so many people that came before us, starting with Neil Armstrong, Katherine Johnson, civil rights movement leaders, everyone who worked on this spacecraft before we got here. Artemis II was not just a test flight, it was proof. Proof that after 50 years of silence, humanity is going back to the moon. What the Artemis II crew saw up there, the craters, the impacts, the eclipse, the far side seen for the first time by human eyes, was just the very beginning, because next time, they will not just fly around it, next time, they land, and when that happens, Explanoid will be here to tell you the full story of what happens when humans walk on another world for the first time in over half a century. Subscribe to Explanoid, because the greatest chapter of space exploration is only just getting started.